1 year of fatherhood has completely changed me in ways that I can and cannot explain, but also at the same time, it has made me stay the same person. I've learned so much throughout the last year about myself, about my wife, my child, about women, about the world, about kids in general, about so many different things that I never knew before. So that's what today's story is about. 1 year of fatherhood and what it has done to me. This is Storytime with Chris. I want to start by saying that this whole episode is from the perspective of, it's from my perspective as a dad, husband, and so there are some things that I think fathers will generally relate to a little bit more than women. However, I think there are some things that everyone can really take from this. Well, at least this is my experience, and I'm not saying I have all the answers and I know everything and I'm the perfect dad and perfect parent. But if you are already a parent or are planning on becoming one, are in the process of that, then I feel like there are a lot of things that throughout your own journey you will learn yourself. Some things that you were expecting, some things that you weren't expecting. And that's exactly what this episode is about. It's not about giving you some sort of lesson on how to be a parent or anything like that. You know, I'm not an expert. I'm just a simple dad, and I'm just talking about my experience and some things that may or may not be helpful to you. But regardless, I hope that this is entertaining, and I hope that you can at least take something from this, whether it's an entertainment factor or something you can take into your own journey as a parent, because that's ultimately what it's about when it comes down to it. It's about being the best version of a parent that you can be. No one's going to be perfect, but you can try your best, and that's ultimately what matters the most. This journey began for me when my wife and I went to the hospital to have just a precautionary checkup on our daughter as she was 40 weeks in the womb, and my wife was growing concerned because she hadn't felt her move in a day or two. And of course, our daughter was at the age where there's just not a lot of room to move, and so she didn't have a lot of wiggle room at all. However, my wife was concerned enough that it was time to go in and just have things checked out. And long story short, my wife ended up being induced, having her water broken, and she was in labor. We didn't know it, but going into labor. And throughout this whole day at the hospital, it was, it was a little strange because it was so calm. It was like too calm. And of course, this is coming from my perspective. My wife, of course, was the one in active labor. She was feeling, she couldn't even feel her contractions until pretty late into the night. We checked in pretty early in the day, maybe like 1 or 2, if I remember correctly. And it's weird because, when you watch TV or you watch movies and there's a labor scene, a lot of times it is super, super anxiety driven. There's a lot of action, high stakes, the baby's coming, the water breaks. There's this giant, commotion surrounding these things. And there's this very big rush to get to the hospital and make it on time before the baby comes. And for us, it was very much the opposite. We were just chilling in this delivery room for like 12 hours, I think. Roughly 12, 13, 14 hours, something like that. And my wife, of course, was chilling in the hospital bed, just contracting and and waiting. And then first of all, I told my wife before we went to the hospital that we should probably grab our go bags and bring that just in case. And my wife said, no, we'll probably be back in an hour or two. Everything's going to be fine. We're just going for a little checkup. And so when we were, while my wife was, hanging out, she sent me to come home and grab all our stuff, make sure we're ready, good to go. So I did that. And while my wife was there, they told her not to eat any food, which, by the way, going forward, my wife said if she had been able to eat, then she probably would have felt a little better during delivery. And the reason why they tell you not to eat is in case they they need to go into an emergency surgery or, emergency C-section. Makes it a little bit easier for the doctors. And for my wife, I think she might have had breakfast that morning. I can't remember. I don't think she had lunch. And we were planning on going to Cafe Rio for dinner that night. But they told her not to eat. So she didn't eat for 13, 14 hours. I mean, she had ice chips. That's it. And so when I went home, I knew like she's not allowed to eat and I don't want to eat in front of her. And we had one last chocolate chip muffin sitting on the counter. I'm like, hey, it's going to go bad in the next few days. We don't want it to go to waste. I'm going to need my energy to get through this. And, obviously that sounds kind of dumb because I'm not the one in active labor. I'm not the one pushing and literally delivering a baby. But I think there's something important in there to think about. And I'm not trying to justify. It might sound a little selfish that I ate. And there was a part of me that was really debating on if I should eat or not, or if I should just stick it out and wait. And ultimately, I did decide to eat this little muffin. And the way that I processed it was she's not able to eat, so it's not fair for me to eat. However, if for whatever reason something starts to go wrong or there is something unexpected that happens, basically the situation gets even more stressful and tense and my wife is not going to be able to do very much. I mean, I might not be able to do very much either, but I know if I eat something, I'm going to be able to keep my head a little bit straighter. I'm going to have a full belly. I'm going to be able to think a little bit more clearly. And so ultimately, that's why I decided to eat this muffin. And I think that's just the way I think about things is, yeah, you could say it was selfish for me to eat. If my wife is going through this whole thing, then I should go through the exact same thing. But to me, it made more sense for me to be prepared and, just be ready in case anything does happen that we weren't expecting. So that's how I justify that. I also had something that surprisingly got me through not just this night, the next few days and the first month or so of maybe 2 months of fatherhood. Anyone that knows me knows that I love coffee, and specifically I like black coffee. And whenever I can, I try to support local roasters and buy, the freshest, best coffee beans that I can. I'm all about supporting these small businesses. I have good friends who own their own coffee shops, their own roasteries. I don't know if that's a word. And so that's, where I try to support. And whenever I do buy, bagged coffee or I go to a store, I try to support places like Trader Joe's or those that carry locally roasted coffee. Some people might say I'm a little bit of a coffee snob, and I would say I value a couple of things, which is coffee and supporting my friends, supporting the locals. And so I had never in my life purchased instant coffee. When I lived with my parents, my mom had some like a Nestle Classico instant coffee. I think I tried that maybe once or twice, but on my own as an adult, I never purchased instant coffee. And one of the most well-known, probably the most popular instant coffee is Folgers coffee because it is very cheap, very accessible. You can buy it at any grocery store. You can buy it in bulk at your local Costco or Sam's Club probably. And it's just very cheap and easy. It's the fast food of coffee, so to speak. And so I had never tried it. I was never interested in trying it. But at the end of the day, on that fateful night, I ended up getting myself an $8,000 cup of coffee, Folgers coffee. How is that possible, you might ask? Well, it's simple. My wife delivered our baby that night. And for those of you who are parents, that hospital bill is kind of crazy when you receive it. In our case, it came in multiple hospital bills, so it wasn't just one. And we added all those bills up and it equaled about $8,000. However, I don't like saying that my baby cost us $8,000 because her life is priceless. I mean, I wouldn't trade anything for her. And I just don't like saying that she was $8,000. So instead, I say that it was an $8,000 cup of coffee, Folgers coffee. And that $8,000 of coffee changed my life in so many different ways. Man, I went back to that coffee room multiple times throughout our stay. They just have it in this machine, at least at this hospital. They have it in a machine, which looks like a soda fountain, but it does coffee. I had personally never seen that before. The most instant coffee I'd ever dealt with was probably the Work Keurig. or like a drip coffee that you can get at a hotel or something like that, but nothing quite like this where it comes out of a machine. And I'll tell you what, throughout that night, throughout those few days at the hospital, that coffee got me through the lack of sleep, and I'd never tasted better tasting coffee in my life than that Folgers machined instant coffee. And when we got back home from the hospital, I ended up taking like a month and a half off of work or something like that, 2 months off of work, which was pretty awesome. I'm very fortunate to have a job where I got 2 weeks of parental leave, and then from there I had to use PTO, but I'd saved up a lot of PTO, and I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to spend that much time with my family. And throughout that time, both to save a little bit of money because my wife wasn't working, and I was getting paid through my PTO, to save some money and to also save a little bit of time, I bought Folgers coffee, and I was drinking it pretty regularly. And it's funny how my perspective just on coffee itself changed for those few days in the hospital specifically. I mean, after that, it was kind of like, but those few days, Folgers instant coffee never tasted better than anything in my life, any other coffee. And that's where this journey started. $8,000 of coffee. Take a moment to think about clapping. Everyone knows how to clap. You may have clapped today. You may have clapped multiple times today. If you've gone to a sporting event recently, you've probably clapped. If you've gone to a concert or some sort of speech, you've clapped. You watched a round of golf, you golf clapped. Clapping is such a basic, simple, easy, regular thing to do. Right? It is. And I'll never forget the moment that my daughter figured out how to clap. It is so crazy how these little things, it seems so, you don't even have to think about clapping. You just do it. It's something that when other people clap, you instinctively do it as well, right? Like, it is so simple. And yet when your kid does it for the first time, it is one of the most special moments. And then they start doing it regularly, and they start figuring out, they can clap when they like something, or they can clap when other people clap, or maybe they use clapping. You have tried teaching them to use sign language for more, and they clap instead. And it's one of those few things about parenthood that maybe to other people, once if someone's talking about this and you're not a parent, you might think, they clapped, big deal. They gave a high five, big deal. They took a step, or they figured out how to roll. Okay, that's great, good for them. But these little small things about parenthood that you experience, you watch your child do them, and it's just, I can't even describe the feeling that it brings, because in the future they're going to be adults who drive, who work, who do amazing things, who have their own hobbies, who talk to people, play video games, read. Maybe they're going to college or learning some sort of trade or skill. All these highly advanced and technical things that one day they're going to do. And yet these little moments where they, like I said, they clap and they figure out how to do it and when to do it. It's like you just feel immensely proud of them, and you feel this tiny little accomplishment is just coolest thing in the world. And even to this day, my daughter, she started to walk for the first time, and she's going from taking these little steps, falling down, to taking more steps and falling down, trying to go faster, forgetting that she's walking, and just I think that's one of the things about parenthood that I wasn't really expecting. When other people have told me about accomplishments that their kids have been doing that are relatively small, I didn't really grasp how important those things are, or how cool it is to see your own kid do it. And I was like those people that, when people talked about it, I was like, that's cool, whatever. Yeah. They learned how to give knuckles. Nice. That's great. And so I have a lot, my whole perspective on that has completely flipped, and I have started to appreciate these little things more and more. And very quickly throughout the year, you realize how fast time flies, and how quickly your child goes from lifting her head up for the first time minutes after she gave birth, by the way, or after she was born, to to learning how to roll over for the first time, to taking her, crawling, to lifting herself up onto, sitting on her own and then walking. It is insane how fast, how yesterday it seems like she was just barely learning how to roll over. How proud of her we were when she kicked her toy that was way up high for the first time, or batted at it for the first time. Now she's throwing the dog's ball or sorting different shapes into their respective containers. And it's, to me, out of all these small things, the one that really stood out to me is clapping. And I hope that this little story, it just makes you appreciate little things a little bit more. And even if you don't have kids, or you're, regardless of where you are in life, ultimately, it's all these little things that happen, whether they add up gradually or all at once. All these little things are really the things that matter the most. All these little micro moments and things that, in the long run, when you look back at memories, usually you think of things like, a vacation that you went on. You remember this experience that you went to. You remember a concert or a sporting event or someone's birthday party, the moment you graduated, all these kind of major events. And it's those little tiny things that as she gets older, I know I might not forget about, but I'm not going to think about as often. And so when you're in that moment, when these little tiny things happen, I think it's really important to celebrate those things and not only think about them, but think about the other small things going on. And that's one thing you can take whether you're a parent or not, is just enjoying these little small moments, these things that seemingly are easy or given or simple. And that is the lesson of clapping. When my wife was pregnant, I had this sudden urge, almost pretty much immediately after we found out that she was pregnant. I had this urge to start running, not running away from my wife or from the baby or anything like that, but running, actually physically going out and running. And that instinct or thought, whatever it was, never really went away from me. And looking back, my wife was really sick during her pregnancy, and a lot of times she couldn't do things that she enjoyed or things that she wanted to do, like go to the gym or even eat certain foods, and just things that come from being so sick. Oh boy, what was it called? I'm forgetting the name. PCOS, is that what it is? I can't remember what it is, but when you get really sick during pregnancy, there are some women who simply cannot keep anything down. And it got to the point where her doctor told her to just anytime she had an urge to eat something or she could keep anything down, whether it was soda, the greasiest fast food she could have, if she was eating just a little bit, it would be enough for the baby to get the nutrition they needed and for my wife to survive, essentially. And she didn't really get to enjoy food or things were pretty miserable. But because of that, and because I felt so bad that she couldn't do anything, I kind of felt, I was sympathetic, and I felt like I needed to kind of put myself not in the same boat, but in a similar boat. So I have to stay home with her and not do a lot of things that I normally would have done, like consistently go to the gym and follow this instinct to run and improve myself. And looking back, I think I should have taken a little bit more time to do those things, even though I would have felt a little bit bad about it. I think ultimately by working on myself and improving what I could when I had all of this free time compared to now as a father, as a parent, you quickly learn you don't get a lot of free time. You get some, but not a lot. And it's different for each person and each family. Everyone has different working situations, different family dynamics. So this isn't the same for everyone. But specifically for me, now I'm pretty much able to consistently go to the gym at least 3 times a week. I try to go 4 or 5, but 3 is usually realistic. And I have had this, since my wife's pregnancy started, and especially since our daughter was born, I have had this feeling that I need to improve myself. Not just, there are other ways that I've improved myself, but specifically physically, working on cardio has been really big for me. And I know that cardio and, trying to grow muscle and things like that don't really go well together. But regardless, I feel like I need to do both. And I'll admit, ever since I started doing that, I started feeling a lot better about myself, feeling feeling like I can be the protector of our family. And I know, like, gender roles, it's 2025, blah, blah, blah. My instinct has always been, and I've always felt that I am the protector of my wife and daughter. My dog, if, he would help protect us as well. But ultimately, I've always felt like that falls on me. And so that's part of the reason why I have also been so focused on this specific area of improving, my weightlifting and my cardio, and all of that is so that I can be the best protector that I can be. And unfortunately, my wife hasn't been able to go as much as she wants to, because I know she does. And she does so much. She sacrifices so much of herself, her time, her body for our daughter, and not just from giving birth to her and providing for her during that time, but now, my wife is nursing her as well and has been for a year. And that takes its own, she at any moment, she just needs to whip them out and feed our daughter. So yeah. And it's tough because I do feel guilt sometimes related to that, where I'm able to go 3 times a week and sometimes my wife can go once a week. And I know I could probably be better about organizing my time so that she's able to do that. But ultimately, this is also different for everyone. Some parents, some moms need to spend as much time as possible with their kids. Some moms definitely feel like they need their own space, their own alone time. And my wife does need that from occasion, but most of the time, if she can choose, she'll spend time with our daughter. And so I appreciate her for that. But I think ultimately what this has shown me is that, when you have kids, one of the reasons that people give for not having kids is because they take up all your time, all your free time. All of a sudden you don't have that. And that is true to some extent. Obviously, when it's just you and your spouse, it's just the two of you, you're both functioning adults who, while you can depend on each other, you are also independent, right? Like, it's not like a child where your child depends on you for literally everything for 18 years, roughly, until they can start providing for themselves. But that's different for every kid. And especially when they're under a year old, they're going to be reliant on you. And so that time factor does play a role. But even then, I feel like ever since she was born, you lose some time, yes, but you also gain this opportunity to grow yourself, whether it's through reading or learning a new skill or going to the gym. I know for me, I have felt more motivated than ever since she joined our lives. And so you can use, maybe it's different for other people. Maybe for some people it's the same. I know for my wife, she has improved in so many different ways, externally, internally, and I have done the same. And for her, she's learned some new skills, some things that she has always wanted to learn. And currently she learned how to crochet. I think that's what she's doing. And she's like making a whole blanket for our daughter for her first birthday, which is really awesome. I know I couldn't do that. But if you ever need a little bit of extra motivation, have a kid. No, that's probably not good advice, but take advantage of that feeling. I feel like that's a very natural thing to feel when you have a kid, is this desire to improve yourself, improve your living situation, improve in general, and grow as a human being. Take advantage of that, because I don't know, we're a year into this, so I don't know if that feeling eventually fades away, if it comes back once you have a second kid, or, I don't know how long that feeling is going to last. But before we found out we were pregnant, I was considering taking a completely different turn with my professional career. And when we found out that we were pregnant, I decided to stay the course and try to grow this way. And now it seems like the past year I have found little moments where I can improve on things that I want to do and things that I am doing professionally. I have talked about this on this podcast before, but there's this love-hate relationship I have with photography, where I go through a phase where I love it and I want to do it 24/7, and then I hate it and I just don't want to do any photography. And over the past year, I've slowly started to do more and more photography, just, little bits and pieces here and there. And part of that is partially because of a book I read, which I'm going to recommend at the end of this episode. So stay tuned for that. But essentially, I thought about what my daughter would look back on And I didn't want her to see me as this person that just gave up on photography or who only did it when I wanted to. I wanted to be able to go back in time and show her throughout her life, as we went on our own adventures, the photos that I've taken, the photos I took before she was in our lives. And so that's one of those ways that I've realized, it's one of those things that I've realized that I have things that I was taking for granted or I could have been doing a little bit more of. And having River really made me realize, I do enjoy those things and I want to be able to share those things with my kids going forward. And so there's this motivation to not only improve myself and try to grow as a person, but to also do the things that I've enjoyed. And so that to me is another lesson, is that even when you have, take advantage, if you have a kid, if you're about to have a kid, take advantage of those little moments where you have some inspiration, where you have, a little, even just the smallest bit of desire to do something, whether you have kids or not. Go in and do those things. Just do them. Because the more you sit and think about it, that's less time you're spending doing it. And that's one thing that I have learned throughout this last year. When I have an opportunity to do something, and of course, time permitting, I do it. And I think it's important to take advantage of those things. So even if it's just 5 minutes, whether it's something small, whether it's something that is 5 minutes or 1 minute or 10 minutes or an hour, if you have those little opportunities, those little moments to do something to grow or to do something that you've wanted to do for a while or that you stopped doing, do them. Because those little moments, like I mentioned with my last little segment, those little moments add up. You'd be surprised how tiny little things can, doing something for 1 minute, all of a sudden you're doing it for 2 minutes and then 4 minutes and then 16 minutes. All of a sudden it's exponential. There is one single pizza place that my wife and I can eat at regularly. That is Blaze Pizza. Blaze Pizza has, not only is their crust or pizza dough gluten-free, it's also vegan and it doesn't have any preservatives. And they also have vegan cheese as an option. And those things are all really important. Now, before pregnancy, my wife was a chickentarian. At least that's what I call her. She would eat pretty much like a vegetarian, but also chicken. And through pregnancy and ever since giving birth, she has since started eating more meat. So chicken, she loves bacon. She absolutely hated bacon before pregnancy. Couldn't stand it. It was one of her least favorite things in the world. Now she asks for it almost daily. Within the first 2 weeks of pregnancy, I believe we went through like 4 pounds of bacon or something like that. That's how much she wanted it. Every morning she was asking for that. So now she's not eating vegan because she's vegan or vegetarian. No. Our daughter is allergic to eggs, dairy, and soy, and that has greatly changed our diets. It has completely changed our diets in both good and bad ways. Some of the good ways, naturally, we're eating a lot less dairy. Dairy isn't always the best for you. For some people, it's great, but a lot of people in general have dairy allergies or lactose intolerance, and that's just a very common thing. Soy is a preservative. And soy is in everything. Literally, pretty much any product you buy, it has soy in it. Bread, tortillas. I'm trying to think of all the things that we've had to replace because we can't eat it anymore. And soy is just, from my research, apparently soy is supposed to help it's supposed to help you lose weight. But in my experience and in our experience in general, it seems like the less that we have eaten soy, the healthier we've become because it is a preservative. So I wonder if there's something to do with that affecting the way foods are broken down once you eat them or what. But because of this, because of the dairy and egg allergies, we've had to eliminate some foods and we've had to make a lot of foods from scratch. And that's both a good and bad thing. I mean, homemade food is always going to taste the best. Well, yeah, that's not always true. Sometimes you want a sandwich from a certain shop, right? And you can try your hardest to replicate it, but unless you're a professional chef or you know exactly how to make what they're making, it's not going to be the same always. And so I think when we go back, when our daughter outgrows some of these allergies, which she's already starting to a little bit with eggs, and we can start eating normally, quote unquote, again, I don't know if we're going to jump right back into that. I know since last year, since I started going back to the gym, and on top of that, eating this new diet, I've lost about 25 pounds, and I feel like I'm getting more and more in shape. every day. Of course, going to the gym helps with that. But the way I feel like we're going to keep shopping for our foods is going to be more looking at ingredient lists rather than looking at caloric information. Because there are some foods out there that maybe they don't have the most calories, but they have 25 ingredients listed. And it just, it's having to look at ingredient lists makes you really realize how much crap is put into foods. And a lot of it is preservatives. Preservatives, they have their place. Obviously, they make things a little bit more shelf stable. They last longer versus when you have something without them. They can get stale really quick or they go bad if you don't use them within a couple of days of opening. So, there's pros and cons to it. But I think ultimately when we don't have any of those restrictions, we can... Oh, I didn't mention, but my wife also has nut allergies. So she's allergic to peanuts and other nuts. So it's at least 5 allergens that we're dealing with, very limited options as far as dining out. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because I think what this has really opened my eyes to is there are all sorts of diets out there. Mediterranean, no carb, keto, carnivore, paleo, all sorts of diets, right? Some of them work for some people and some of them don't work for other people. And what I've found for me is I think you don't need to completely change diets to become healthy. I think our relationship with food is very skewed, especially with the way we were taught in school, at least the way I was taught. There was a food pyramid. It said you need to eat a lot of grains, a lot of carbs, and then I forget what each layer was. But I think it is important to figure out what lifestyle works for you and not beating ourselves up when we have, a cheat meal or things like that. And just making foods from scratch, in my opinion, has really helped alleviate some of that guilt you feel when you eat unhealthy. When you are the one that makes your buns and your burger patties and your fries, all the sauces that go with it, all that stuff. It feels like it's not the same as going to like a McDonald's or, just some fast food restaurant where you can easily get one. And so what I think I'm trying to say is, the thing that I learned here is to find a lifestyle that works for whatever your current situation is and adapt it to meet whatever needs you have. And you can overcome some of those traps that people fall into. And especially having a kid now, we're buying a lot more fruits, a lot more veggies, and just having those foods around makes it a lot easier to eat healthy, or at least eat more of those healthy foods. Because before River was born, I did not want to eat vegetables, and sometimes I still don't, but I'm like, you know what? We're teaching our daughter to, and they are really good for you. There's lots of benefits to doing it, so I should be doing the same thing. And so having a kid, it does help in some ways it doesn't, but if you don't have to eat chicken and rice for every meal to be healthy. If you have specific goals or specific, if you want to be a bodybuilder or you want to compete in some sort of, body sculpting event, or if you're a runner or whatever your case is, there's a good balance between eating healthy and enjoying what you're eating and eating quote unquote unhealthy. I think it's key to find that balance and find what works for each individual person. And it can also be a challenge when you have kids as well, because you not only have to make food, my wife and I would always make a lot of spicy foods, a lot of heat, jalapenos, peppers, hot sauce. And since we had River, we've had to cut down on that, and you make basically whatever your base meal, as plain or as non-spicy as possible, especially with our daughter who has sensitive tummy already. We don't want to aggravate that any more than we have to. And I think the reason why this is something I wanted to talk about is because for me personally, I talked earlier about being the protector of our family, being able to defend ourselves if we need to, and me being the one to do that or to be in charge of that. Kind of along those lines, in a way, being healthy to me, for me specifically, and this doesn't, I'm not going to look at judge anyone else if they have a different belief system or think differently than I do. But for me, healthy is being able to run around and play with my daughter and wife and dog, without huffing and puffing, and also being well balanced in what we eat, not having fast food for every meal, being able to eat a lot of good foods at home that are nourishing, well balanced, but also not being, not feeling any guilt when you eat out or when you have a sweet treat, because I think the way you talk about food can be really impactful with kids. And we want to be, as positive with that, because, kids, they pick up on some of the negative things that you say. And even if it's, simple as, saying something like, oh, I don't eat cookies because they make me fat, blah, blah, blah. You might think that's like such a harmless thing to say, but kids, if they hear that once or twice or even multiple times, then they'll start associating that when they eat cookies. And while it may be true, you probably shouldn't eat, I actually do this sometimes, but you probably shouldn't eat 20 cookies per sitting, but you should be able to enjoy a few at least, everything in moderation. And that's kind of where I was going with this, or trying to go with this. I don't know. I kind of went off the rails there a little bit. But that's something I didn't think about a ton of. I didn't think about that too much. We had conversations about what feeding our daughter would look like going forward, or, before we had her. We talked about baby led weaning and what kind of foods that she would be eating when, as she continues to grow from infant to toddler to kid. I don't know what's after toddler. Is that just youth or kid? Whatever's next after that. So anyway, it is really important to think about the way you talk about food, and of course the way you eat and the way you react to what people are eating, and being able to try new foods, and if you don't like something, finding tactful ways to say that, or just things that I didn't really think about before becoming a parent. I have always been pretty non-picky. I'll eat anything. And so, if someone makes me food, I don't think I've ever had a food where I completely hated something and just couldn't eat it or anything like that. Besides like disgusting things like olives and mushrooms. No, mushrooms aren't bad. When I was younger, I hated mushrooms. Olives. What else is gross? Just olives. My wife loves olives, so she's going to love listening to this part. But anyway, just think about that. Think about the way you eat and the way that you want to, what sort of lifestyle you want to have, and what kind of lifestyle you want your kids to have. And what, are there things that when you were a kid, you wished your parents would have done? Or, how can you positively reinforce your children to have a good relationship with food? That's what I think I was trying to say. I don't know. I think I just kind of went off topic. This was something I didn't have written down, and so it kind of went off the rails. So yeah, that's it for that topic. This episode is starting to get a little bit long, and it's funny because I had this whole plan for what this episode would be like, and I thought about it for weeks. I, wrote everything down. I planned it. I rewrote it in an organized, structured way. And then I started recording it the other day, and something about it just didn't sit right with me. And I felt like the way I was going about this wasn't the way that I wanted to go about it. And so now this is me sort of improvising and focusing on a few really key ideas that I think have been really impactful. I don't know if these are the most impactful things over this past year of being a dad, but they are things that really did affect me and change my relationship with myself, my wife, my daughter, and just in general. And so I hope you were able to take something out of this. Like I said, a lot of these things don't just fall, under someone who's a parent. You don't have to listen to this podcast and be a parent, or you can be a parent, or you don't have to be a man or a woman. It doesn't really matter. I just hope that you enjoyed listening to me talk about these things, about being a dad and what it's meant to me over the last year, and some of the lessons that I've learned. Now, there is a lot more to talk about regarding parenting, but like I said, this episode has gone on really long already, a lot longer than I was anticipating. And so with that being said, this whole parenting topic is going to be a series you can find on my channel. It's going to be under its own playlist. I think the first episode will probably be the one that I recorded last year with my dad about, talking to him about fatherhood and what it's meant to him and what to expect. And so you can go check that out and check out the playlist. As I add more parenting related episodes, and I'll contribute to that playlist as well. So with that being said, I am going to get to my recommendation. This is something new that I'm adding to season 3, which I don't know if I've talked about this, but season 3, this is the first episode. Hopefully you like the visuals. I worked on them for a lot longer than I should have. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to start doing recommendations. They might be books, TV shows, activities, just little dumb recommendations. I got this from Rhett and Link. I listened to their podcast, Ear Biscuits, which is my favorite podcast to listen to. You should absolutely listen to it as well. But I did get this idea from them, so I'm fully disclosing that now. And if they don't like it, then I don't have to do it. But I think it's good to, find things that have impacted you in a positive or a meaningful way. And this book is one of them, Atomic Habits by James Clear. This is a book that is probably the best self-improvement book that I've ever read. Well, at least, I don't know if it's the best self-improvement book that I've ever read, but it's the one that's been the most impactful for me. And specifically, there's one section that really, I think, changed my perception of myself and of the way that I wanted to move forward with my life. And it really jump-started a lot of me focusing on improving myself in several different ways. And that idea is this idea of how you view yourself. There are ways that, you want to be perceived by outsiders, whether it's on social media or even like your own family or friends. You want them to see you in a certain way. You want your kids and wife to see you in a certain way. But most importantly, you want to stay true to who you are and figure out how you want to view yourself. And that reflection should reflect to everyone around you. That's not a quote from this book, but that's kind of what I took from it. So I highly recommend it. It's, like I said, it's a self-improvement book, and it's the one that helped me the most, honestly. So check that out. Thank you again for listening. If you haven't yet, please go like this video, subscribe, and if you have any questions on parenthood or fatherhood, feel free to leave them in the comments or let me know your thoughts on this episode. Honestly, I love to hear all the feedback and figure out how I can improve going forward. Once again, thank you. This has been Storytime with Chris.